My sister always said my illness was all in my head. But during a family trip, I started getting violently sick again for the first time in years. Then I looked at my medication and realized one pill wasn't mine. What my sister admitted after that changed our relationship forever. I want to start by telling you something that took me a long time to say out loud. My sister didn't believe I was sick. Not in the beginning. Not while I was getting diagnosed. Not during the years I spent learning how to manage my condition and build a life around it. Not ever, really. She thought I was performing. And one day, one very specific day, she decided to test that theory. With my medication. My name is Meg. I'm 29. I've had an autoimmune condition since I was 22. I won't name the specific diagnosis because it's mine and it's private, but what I will tell you is that it affects my joints, my energy levels, and my immune response in ways that are invisible from the outside and completely real from the inside. That invisibility is the thing. That's always been the thing. I don't look sick. On a good day, I look completely fine. I can have a conversation, hold a job, laugh at something, seem entirely normal to someone who doesn't know what they're looking at. What they're not seeing is the medication that makes that possible. The strict schedule. The careful management of sleep and stress and diet. The years of figuring out exactly what my body needs to function. Take away the medication and that picture changes fast. My sister's name is Petra. She's 32. And for as long as I've been sick, Petra has had what I can only describe as a deep, persistent skepticism about my diagnosis. She never said it flat out, not for a long time. She was more subtle than that. Little comments. You seemed fine at dinner last week. Aren't you being a bit dramatic? I read that a lot of people with that diagnosis just have anxiety. I absorbed it. For years I absorbed it. Because she's my sister and I loved her and I kept telling myself she just didn't fully understand. She understood more than I gave her credit for. She just didn't believe it. This is something a lot of people with invisible illnesses will recognize immediately. The specific exhaustion of proving something that shouldn't require proof. Of having your own body treated like a debate topic. It doesn't get easier. You just get better at ignoring it. Until you can't anymore. The incident happened during a weekend trip. My parents have a house about 2 hours outside the city. We go there a few times a year, holidays, sometimes a summer weekend. The whole family together under one roof. Petra and I were both staying for a long weekend. 4 days. My parents, my sister, me, and Petra's boyfriend at the time, a guy named Ren who was quiet and mostly stayed out of family dynamics. I travel with my medication carefully. It's in a pill organizer, the weekly kind, each day clearly labeled. I keep it in my toiletry bag, which I keep in my room. Friday night was fine. Saturday was fine. I took my medication as scheduled, felt okay, everything normal. Sunday morning I woke up wrong. Wrong is the best word I have for it. Not dramatically sick. Not emergency room sick. Just off. That specific feeling my body gets when something is missing. A low-grade heaviness. Joint stiffness that shouldn't have been there given my recent management. The particular fatigue that comes not from lack of sleep but from my body working harder than it should be. I lay in bed for a moment and ran through the mental checklist I've been running for 7 years. Sleep, fine. Stress, manageable. Diet, fine. Medication. I got up and checked my pill organizer. Sunday's compartment was empty. I had taken them, but the feeling in my body said something was wrong. I didn't connect it immediately. I thought maybe I was coming down with something. I took it easy that day, drank extra water, rested more than usual. Monday, the last day of the trip, was worse. I went to bed Monday night feeling genuinely unwell in a way I recognized from years ago. Before I'd found the right medication. Before things were managed. That specific sliding feeling of my body heading somewhere I didn't want it to go. I drove home Tuesday morning, made an appointment with my doctor that afternoon, and while I was waiting for the appointment, I went through my pill organizer again. The pills in the remaining compartments looked right, but something made me look closer. One of them, I'd had the same prescription long enough to know exactly what it looked like, was slightly wrong. The shade was almost identical. The size was almost identical. Almost. I want to pause here because I know what some of you are thinking. You're thinking maybe I'm misremembering, maybe it was a manufacturing variation, maybe I'm connecting dots that weren't meant to connect. I thought all of those things. For about 40 minutes I talked myself in circles. And then I called my pharmacist. I described what I was seeing. The pharmacist asked me to bring the pill in. I brought it in. It was not my medication. It was a common over-the-counter supplement. Visually similar. Completely different function. Not harmful, that's important. It wasn't something dangerous, but also not what my body needed to manage my condition. Effectively a placebo. The pharmacist asked me if I'd gotten the prescription from a different source. I said no. She asked if I had any idea how this could have happened. I didn't say anything for a moment, and then I thought about the weekend. About who had access to my room. About who had been in and out of the house. I drove home and sat in my car for a long time. I didn't call Petra immediately. I needed to be sure. And I needed to decide how I wanted to handle it, because I knew that once I said something, there was no taking it back. I thought about the timeline. The pills had been switched at some point during the weekend. My toiletry bag was in my room, but I hadn't locked the door. Anyone in the house could have accessed it while I was asleep, or outside, or in the kitchen. My parents wouldn't have done this. I know my parents. That thought didn't even fully form before I dismissed it. Ran had no reason to and no knowledge of my medication, which left Petra, who had spent years suggesting I was exaggerating, who had sent me articles about psychosomatic illness, who had once at a family dinner said, half joking, full meaning, I just wonder sometimes if you'd feel better if you decided to feel better. I called her the next evening. I didn't lead with an accusation. I told her what had happened. The weekend, the symptoms, the pharmacist visit. I told her what the pharmacist had found. I kept my voice even. I stated the facts. Then I said, I need to ask you directly. Did you switch my medication? Silence. Long silence. And then Petra said, I just wanted to see. 3 words. I just wanted to see. I sat with that for a moment before I responded. You wanted to see, I said. Meg, I have always thought. I know what you've always thought, I said. I've been listening to what you've always thought for 7 years. I wasn't trying to hurt you. If the pills didn't matter, then. Petra. I stopped her. You interfered with my prescribed medication. Without my knowledge, without my consent, to run an experiment on my body to satisfy a belief you had about my illness. Do you understand what that is? She was quiet. I didn't think it would actually affect you, she said finally. But it did, I said. And you thought it wouldn't because you believed I was faking, which means you either thought nothing would happen and you'd be proven right, or something would happen and you'd have to be wrong. Either way, you were willing to do this to me. More silence. Then, I'm sorry. I made a mistake. I said, I need some time. And I hung up. I didn't think it would actually affect you. I've turned that sentence over so many times, because embedded in it is the full shape of everything she believed. She thought nothing would happen. She counted on nothing happening. She had built such a complete conviction that I was performing illness that she was genuinely surprised when removing my medication made me sick. That's not a misunderstanding. That's a worldview. And you can't reason someone out of a worldview with a single conversation. I told my parents. I wasn't going to. I went back and forth on it for about a week. Part of me wanted to handle it privately, between Petra and me. But I kept coming back to one thing. This had happened in their house, during a family weekend. And if I didn't say anything, I was carrying it alone while Petra carried nothing. That didn't seem right. My mom's reaction was the one I expected and dreaded. Shock first. Then concern. And I watched this happen in real time, a kind of instinct to find the softest possible framing for what Petra had done. She made a terrible mistake, my mom said. But she loves you. She was confused about your illness. Mom, I said carefully. She switched my medication without telling me to prove a theory. That's not confusion. That's a decision. My dad was quieter. He said very little during that conversation, but he called me the next day and said, "What she did was wrong. I want you to know I believe that." That mattered. My mom came around more slowly. But she came around. Petra sent me a long message about 2 weeks after our phone call. I read it twice. It was thorough. She explained, really explained, not just apologized, where her disbelief had come from. Some of it I'd known. She had a friend in college who had faked a serious illness for attention, and it had affected a lot of people badly, and she'd never fully processed what that had done to her ability to trust claims of invisible illness. Some of it I hadn't known. She'd told herself, for years, that being skeptical was a form of protecting me from something. That if she could just prove I was okay, I could stop managing a condition and just live. That she'd convinced herself on some level that her disbelief was actually love in a distorted form. I don't say that to excuse what she did. I say it because understanding why someone does something and forgiving them for it are not the same step. You can do one without the other. You can also eventually do both. I'm not fully there yet, but I'm somewhere. The part about protecting me, I've sat with that for a long time. Because it's not logical, but it is human. People sometimes construct elaborate internal justifications for the things they need to believe. It doesn't make those things right, but it makes them comprehensible. And comprehensible is a starting point. Petra and I see each other at family things now. We are careful with each other in the way that people are when something has broken and been partially repaired. We talk. We're not cold. There's something real still between us. She's still my sister and I grew up with her, and that doesn't just evaporate. But something is different. I don't leave my medication unattended around her. Not because I think she'd do it again. I genuinely don't think she would, but because something in me needed to close that door. To install a lock that didn't exist before. That's just honest. She's also different with me. More careful about what she says regarding my health. She asks how I'm doing and she waits for the real answer. She doesn't send articles anymore. Whether that's genuine change or careful management of me, I don't know yet. I'm watching. I'm not deciding. I want to say something to anyone listening to this who lives with an invisible illness. You do not owe anyone proof. Not your family. Not your friends. Not the person at work who gives you a look when you use the accessible bathroom. Not anyone. Your body is not a debate. Your diagnosis is not a vote. The fact that you look okay from the outside is not evidence of anything except that the human body is complicated and illness rarely announces itself visually. You know what's real. You've been living in it. What Petra did was wrong, not just because it was harmful, but because it was built on the assumption that her belief about my body mattered more than my lived experience of it. It doesn't. Nobody's does. I'm doing okay now. My medication is back on track. My body has mostly recalibrated. The symptoms from that weekend faded within about 2 weeks of being back on my proper schedule. I manage my condition. I take my medication. I live my life in the careful, deliberate, mostly functional way I've been living it for 7 years. My sister knows now, beyond any theory she could construct, that what I have is real. She watched it herself. She just learned it in the worst possible way. And I am still, slowly, deciding what to do with that.